Hi, my name is Gary Glass. I'm the director of the American Homebrewers Association. I'm teaching you how to make beer at home. In this segment, we'll cover managing fermentation. Now we've got our wort in the fermenter. What I'm going to need to do is take a reading of the temperature to make sure we're at the right temperature for adding our yeast. And so I'm going to sanitize some equipment. I'm going to sanitize the thermometer and our hydrometer. And I'm even going to sanitize the packaging for the yeast. You can't be too careful. So just getting a little sanitizer on the yeast packet itself will make sure that there's nothing on there that can get into the beer. We take our thermometer, and this is a floating thermometer, so I can just put it right into that bucket, swirl it around a little bit, make sure our temperature is evenly mixed in the fermenter. Give it a few seconds to get to temperature, and it looks like we're right at about 73 degrees. You want to be between 75 and 65 degrees, so that's great, perfect temperature for this. We're ready to go. If for whatever reason your temperature is off, you can put the lid back on, stick it in your sink with some cold water if you need to drop the temperature, or some warm water if you need to raise the temperature. Just want to make sure you're in that temperature range of 75 to 65 degrees before you pitch your yeast. And pitching the yeast, that's the term for adding yeast to beer. Now take our hydrometer reading, and what this is, it's a little floating device. It's calibrated, and it's got markings on here that tell you the density of the beer. Stick this into the beer, let it float, and what you're going to read on there is the meniscus, where it comes up to the edge of the hydrometer. And you read it on the scale, it starts with the 1.000. And for this beer, we're expecting to get a gravity reading of 1.05. That's a pretty typical range for a beer. That'd be about the gravity you would have for a pale ale, or in this case, a Hefeweizen. Produce a beer somewhere in the range of about 5% alcohol. And yeah, it looks like we're just about right at 1049, expecting to be somewhere in the range of 1048 to 1052. So right in the range where we wanted to be. That's great. Now we want to add our yeast. And so I'm going to take some scissors to cut them open, and I'll sanitize the scissors too for good measure. And like I said earlier in the cleaning and sanitation segment, if we were using bleach, you'd have to make sure that everything was soaked for 15 minutes. We're using Star San, so that it only takes a contact time of about 15 seconds. Cut this open, and then we just pour it slowly in our fermenter. Okay, so we've pitched our yeast. We're ready to seal up the fermenter. And I'm just going to re-sanitize this fermenter lid, just as a precaution. Get that on. And then we'll add our airlock. So as you can see, there's a little bit of sanitizer in the airlock. It'll probably take about 24 hours before you'll start seeing some activity, but once the fermentation starts going, you'll see the carbon dioxide bubbling through here. That'll get your fermentation going. You want to store this in a place where it's going to be, between 75 and 65 degrees. That's your fermentation temperature for ales. And you want to make sure it's in a fairly dark place. Direct sunlight's not good for beer. It can cause off flavors that actually smell like skunk. So light is bad for it. So direct sunlight, incandescent light's fine. But so like a closet is a perfect place for your fermentation. Now it's going to take about a week to a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks for the fermentation to complete. So just watch that airlock. You see when it stops bubbling. It hasn't bubbled for a couple of days, you're probably done with the fermentation. And then you'll be ready to move on to the next step. So we've covered managing fermentation. Next up, we'll talk about getting ready to bottle.